The House just passed its 2025 budget bill, and this is the first step in getting Opportunity Zone legislation extended later this year to renew the program. In today's episode, I'll tell you exactly what this means, what's next for Opportunity Zones, and provide additional OZ legislation updates. Welcome to the March 2025 edition of Opportunity Zones Office Hours. I'm Jimmy Atkinson, founder of OpportunityZones.com. It is Monday, March 3rd, 2025, and you can join me the first Monday of every month at 3 p.m. Eastern Time to get your Opportunity Zone questions answered live. If you have any questions about Opportunity Zones, you could submit them by using the chat. Whatever questions you have about Opportunity Zones, ask me anything. I'm here to answer your questions for the next 30 minutes or so. Just type your questions into the YouTube live chat. But before I get to the questions, let's talk about the major congressional news from last week and what it means for Opportunity Zones. So this was last Tuesday night, in case you're not aware, but it was big news in all the newspapers on Wednesday morning. But last Tuesday night is when the House met and they were trying to get the votes together to pass the Republican Party's budget plan for 2025. The budget blueprint is essentially for 2025 and the next 10 years. And there was a lot of drama in the House that day. At first, it looked like they didn't have enough votes. Speaker Johnson was actually starting to send people home saying, hey, we're not going to do the vote tonight. But then at the last minute, I guess they had some final discussions with a couple of members. They were able to sway those members over onto their side, and they called everybody back to the House chamber. And then over the course of the next hour or so, they had the floor vote. And they did have the votes and it did go through. So I'm going to play the video for you right now of the reaction to when they realized that the vote had gone through and had succeeded. A lot of hooting and hollering, some cheering on the floor of the House right there. You can see 217 to 213 is when they had it locked up. The couple more nay votes came in from the Democratic Party, and the final tally was 217 to 215. But what the heck is this even? Anyway, what is it that they actually passed, and where are we on the roadmap essentially to getting Opportunity Zones extended and renewed later this year? Well, this was, like I mentioned, the Republicans' blueprint essentially for the 2025 budget and the budget over the next 10-year period. And it calls for $4.5 trillion in tax cuts over the next 10 years. I'll show a screenshot of the bill right now. Let me see one moment here, get this up on the screen. But there's not a lot of detail here, right? It really is just a blueprint that is included in the text of this bill. So this is from house.gov. You can find the actual text for this bill on here, and I'll just scroll down to the good stuff. But this was House Continuing Resolution 14, if you want to look it up. And you can see there's just big numbers laid out for the following 10 fiscal years. And you can see a decrease in federal revenues by $450 billion per year for each of the next 10 years. That's where the $4.5 trillion in tax cuts comes into play. And it goes on and on and on. But essentially, there's not a lot of specificity in this. It really is just a blueprint, but it's a really big deal because it was the first step in getting the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, of which Opportunity Zones is a small part, passed later this year. And I made a post to LinkedIn on Tuesday night after that floor vote went through, and it was one of my most popular LinkedIn posts of my life. It had a lot of interaction, a lot of engagements from the Opportunity Zones industry. Basically, how I framed it was it was the first step to getting OZs extended and renewed, and it really is. So without this key step, Opportunity Zone legislation doesn't happen. So what comes next for Opportunity Zones? Well, what this does is it gives the House the blueprint for putting together actual tax legislation. Now, what will happen before then is this bill goes to the Senate. The Senate may end up revising it a little bit, or they might sign it as is. If they revise it a little bit, it goes back to the House. They'll pass it, and then they can start working on the actual tax legislation. But there's a couple of different options that were floating around. And one was, in order to pass Trump's big agenda, they could go down one of two different routes. One was they have two different bills. One bill would deal with just tax legislation, but the other bill would actually be higher priority. And that other bill would deal with the border, with national defense, with military spending, and a handful of other Trump agenda items that did not pertain to tax. Trump signaled his support for the other option, which was, let's not do this one bill at a time in two separate bills. Let's package everything into one big, beautiful bill, as he referred to it, in all caps, as he likes to do sometimes. So the goal still is to have Trump's entire agenda, including the tax legislation, passed as one big, beautiful bill. This is a huge first step in getting there, because now, the plan from here, just how the timing could possibly unfold, is that over the course of this month and into April, we could possibly start getting some draft legislation written. Now, when could this actually pass, though? That's one of the most common questions that I get. And I don't think this is going to pass anytime too soon. This, again, what passed 217 to 215 last Tuesday night was really just the first step. It was the framework for tax legislation. Okay. But getting the tax legislation across the finish line, getting the one big beautiful bill drafted in the House Ways and Means Committee and the other committees that need to get involved on both the House and the Senate side, getting the floor vote, sending it to the Senate, getting revisions back to the House, passing it again, and then getting it on President Trump's desk. That's a process that's going to take not days and not weeks, but it will literally take months for that process to unfold. What I've heard is that probably best case scenario is that Trump enacts this one big beautiful bill, which will include renewal of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and renewal of opportunity zones at some point this summer. That's like the earliest it could possibly happen. Call it like July, end of July, beginning of August, probably. That is best case scenario. More likely, it's going to drag out a little bit longer than that. I'm anticipating still, as I have been saying for the past few months, that we're probably looking at something toward the end of this year. By the way, worst case scenario is they're not able to pass it. There is still a chance that the Republican Party could fail to get tax legislation extended this year. And if that happens, that's obviously very bad news, but it is a real possibility. So I don't want to lead anybody into assuming that this is a done deal. This was a huge first step, huge hurdle cleared, check, but there's still a lot more steps that need to unfold. I'm still calling for probably something in December to get passed, just because Congress doesn't really like to do anything too quickly, and best case scenario is probably not the one that's going to unfold. You could even potentially see this drag into next year, January. If that happens, though, and if they are able to pass it, I would guess it'd probably be early in January rather than later in January. It would be pretty close to the beginning of the year. But I'm still thinking most likely we're looking at December, but it could be sooner. It could be earlier than that, earlier than I had previously anticipated, given that this step has been cleared and given that Trump has signaled his support for passing his agenda. Defense spending, border issues, and tax, all as part of one huge bill. And then another question I get is, well, what's in it, right? What's even going to be in this for opportunity zones? And really, there's three big things that could happen with opportunity zones. One is an extension of the current opportunity zone tax policy as we know it, just bumping out that deferral date and that sunset date by 2 years from 2026 to 2028. Okay. Another thing that they can do is renew opportunity zones. So reauthorize a period of time for governors of every state to nominate new opportunity zones for another maybe 7 to 10 year period. That's a opportunity zones renewal. And then third is kind of pairing alongside with the renewal is Congress can enable that renewal mechanism to happen automatically every 7 to 10 years. So making opportunity zones permanent, essentially. So, one of those things might happen, or possibly all of them might happen in this tax legislation. And we're going to find out a lot more. And I'm going to continue to cover it on this show and on opportunityzones.com throughout the rest of the year until we finally get the good news that we're waiting for, that President Trump signs into law opportunity zone extension and renewal legislation. I do want to go to everybody's questions. So by the way, if you have any questions for me or any comments, feel free to say hi. Feel free to ask your question. Let's see. I'm going to turn to the comments right now. We do have a few here. Let's see. EB5. What do you think will happen? This is a question from Endena, excuse me. Well, there was some big news about EB5 actually just last week. And by the way, I'm not an EB5 expert. I know that there are quite a few professional attorneys and accountants and other professional services providers in the opportunity zone space who have their roots in the EB5 program. So if any of you are watching right now and you want to chime in with EB5 news, please feel free to chime in, type your comment and answers into the YouTube chat. But by the way, for those who don't know, the EB5 is an immigration program. It's a type of visa that brings in foreign investors into the United States, allows them to immigrate into the United States so long as they make meaningful investments in the United States. That's what it is at a high level. That's about all I know about it. President Trump announced, I think it was just a few days ago, I think it was last week, right around the same time that the this House budget went through, that he's looking to roll out a new program, which he's calling the Gold program, or the Visa Gold program, which sounds to me like it's a credit card, first of all. So I don't know if the branding on that is quite right, but maybe that was his intention. But that might replace the EB5 program. And I don't know what they're going to call that. I don't know if that would be like an EB6 or an EB7, or if it would be like a whole new thing that wouldn't be called EB. But EB5 is in some jeopardy, I think, given Trump's idea to have this essentially this gold card that he would sell off for it would cost $5 million for somebody to invest in the United States and to be able to come in. So I don't know if that's an extension of EB5 or if it's a renewal of EB5, but I think it would dramatically change what the EB5 program looks like if this comes into effect. Thank you for the question there. And then, yeah, you do clarify gold card replacing EB5. So yeah, I think I gave all I know about that one. Let's see. We got a question here from Prakash, and the question is, do the taxes on past capital gains, are they due in 2027? Prakash, yes, that is what's going to end up happening. And if I can just go to the whiteboard, I'll just kind of diagram what all of that looks like in case you're not familiar. So I'm just going to draw a timeline. Actually, I'm going to use black here. I'll draw a timeline on the whiteboard here and just kind of show you exactly what the current Opportunity Zone program looks like now and how it might change if we get some tax legislation in the future. Okay, so right here, we'll say this is 12/31/26 is this tick mark here. We'll say this is 2018 when the program began. Okay, so essentially, what happens if you put a Opportunity Zone investment, if you deploy a deferred capital gain into a qualified opportunity fund at any point during this period of time, so you've got a QOF investment, okay, then you essentially get to defer capital gains tax recognition until the deferral date. Now, currently, the deferral date is 12/31/26. By the way, I put a couple other tick marks in here because we also had some kickers at the end of 2019, at the end of 2021 that have since expired, but you got to reduce the amount of gain that you recognized on this date if you got your investment in this window here prior to the end of 2021. Those are no longer available, though. Now, what the tax legislation might do for opportunity zones is change this date and move it out to 12 31, 2028. Let's put that out here. So then the question becomes, okay, well, are the past capital gains taxes due in 27 or are they due in 2029? So why am I talking about those years, first of all? So if you recognize the gain on 12/31/26, essentially your due date to actually pay the taxes is April 15th of 2027. So that's why Prakash uses 27 and I'm using 27 now too. Now, if this date gets pushed out to 2028, there's a little bit of question right now. To whom does that new date apply? Does it apply to anyone who made an investment in opportunity zones at any point in time? Or will it apply only to investors who place an opportunity zone investment after this date gets changed by way of tax legislation? That's unclear right now. That is actually still up for debate. That legislation hasn't been drafted yet. So, keep following us here at opportunityzones.com and on this YouTube channel and on our LinkedIn. And we'll be posting a lot more updates on what the tax legislation looks like as new details emerge. The quick answer to your question, Prakash, is yes, you should assume that the tax on your deferred capital gain is due in April of 2027. There's a chance it won't be, right? And that would be the best case scenario is that this actually gets bumped out to 2029 potentially. But I wouldn't count on it. I would count on making sure you have liquidity in 27 to pay that liability. There's a chance you won't need it. Maybe it'll get bumped out to 29, but don't count on it. Is my answer to you right there. Okay, let me see. What other questions do we have here? We got a question here from Audio Skills. Jimmy, are you still doing your Opportunity Zone Project pitch day this week? Am I too late to register? Great question. And yes, and I meant to mention this a moment ago. And in fact, actually, we are going to be covering the Opportunity Zone legislation in great detail on OZ Pitch Day. It'll be a huge topic of discussion on our two panels that we have gathered for that event. So let me just share my screen one more time here. There it is. So OZ Pitch Day is the event that I do 3 times a year. It's a live online event. It's conducted via Zoom, and it is geared toward driving transaction investments in opportunity zones. So if you have your own QOF and you're looking for deal flow, or you're an investor and you're looking to place a capital gain into a qualified opportunity fund, or if you're a developer or a sponsor and you're looking for opportunity zone investors or capital from qualified opportunity funds, it's a great way for all of those parties to meet in one big Zoom meeting. We have an agenda up on the website that shows you what type of programming is going to be available. I'll just walk through it in a minute here. I always open up the day with my keynote speech, my morning keynote. This time around, Thursday, March 6th, 2025, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Opportunity Zones Explained. Basically a crash course in how opportunity zones work and in what you should be looking for if you're an investor or a self-funded QOF and you're looking for a deal, what you should look for in a deal or in a fund. We have a variety of presentations from different OZ deals throughout the course of the day. It's a showcase of some of the greatest opportunity zone investment opportunities all across the country. Savoy Equity Partners is our first presenting sponsor at 10:30 a.m. They do multifamily deals in Dallas, Texas. Altus Capital is presenting their OZ Fund 2, which is closing shortly. They're a national multifamily fund. They've currently allocated capital in this fund to Austin, Charlotte, and Washington, D.C. Your Space America Self Storage is our title sponsor. Thank you very much to them for all of their support in helping to sponsor this event. They're our big presenter at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. They have 3 self-storage projects in different opportunity zone locations in Phoenix, Arizona, Tucson, Arizona, and Las Vegas, Nevada. I think the fundraising period on a couple of them is getting really close to being closed. I think they might have closed one or both of them. The Tucson deal just opened though, so that's the one they're going to be presenting on Thursday. And then we also have some interactive panel discussions. 11:45 a.m. Eastern is our panel called Ask the OZ Experts. It'll be me, just like on this show where I address your questions, but I'm also joined on OZ Pitch Day by three of the best Opportunity Zone attorneys around the country. Andrew Daup is joining us from from Columbus, Ohio, I should say. Brett Siglin's joining us from Phoenix, Arizona, and Mr. Ashley Tyson's joining us from Charlotte, North Carolina, spread all over the country, different regions of the country. And they're going to be joining to take your OZ questions and answer them live. Capital Square is participating in a roundtable discussion at 12:35 p.m. Eastern Time titled The Evolution of Opportunity Zones. I'm looking forward to that. They're doing a fundraise right now for their 9th Opportunity Zone project. They've to date have raised hundreds of millions of dollars in their OZ platform, and they've built close to 2,000 housing units in the Mid-Atlantic region of the country. Really great company, great work they're doing. Our 1 p.m. panel, I think, might be the most popular panel we will have ever had, but time will tell. I'll let you know on Thursday how popular it is, but it's a very popular topic as always. We're talking about Trump's OZ plan for 2025. Essentially, we're going to be breaking down in great detail how the White House, how Trump is supporting Opportunity Zone extension and renewal legislation, and what that legislation is going to look like, and timing on it. And I'm joined by two of the best experts on this topic, Emily Lavery from Fulcrum Public Affairs. She used to be in Senator Tim Scott's office. And Peter Lawrence from Novogradac and Company. He's the individual I get most of my tax legislation knowledge from. We'll do an OZ Masterclass showcase featuring some of our most popular master classes at OZ Insiders over the past year. That afternoon, we'll round out the day with a presentation from U.S. Energy Development Company's Oil and Gas QOZ Fund 3. They are identifying oil and natural gas wells in the Permian Basin of Texas. And if it is happened to be slotted into an Opportunity Zone, they put it in as part of their QOF. It's a really interesting tax mitigation strategy with an oil and gas component to it. And then I'll give concluding remarks at 2:45 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, so that is my recap of what we have on tap for OZ Pitch Day. If you're interested in learning more about this event or getting registered for it, please head over to ozpitchday.com. Or if you're on opportunityzones.com, just click the OZ Pitch Day link in the top right corner there. It's free to register. It's free to attend. All I ask is your name, your email address, and tell me who you are. Tell me if you're an individual investor or a fund company or who you are there. And then you get registered. You get the Zoom registration link sent to you within minutes of hitting that button there. So let's go back to the phone lines here and see if we can answer some more questions. Let's see. We got a question here from Opportunity Zones. Asks, the Extension Act also indicates the 5 and 10% steps coming back, but over a 6-year hold versus the original 7 years expired. So one of two scenarios could play out. A, deferral is extended to 2028. And the 6-year hold would apply to all investors, or they could look at having two different deferral dates, 2028 and 2032, at which new investments into QOF's post-extension legislation could get the 6-year step up 15% benefits. Yeah, so thank you for that comment there. I think you're right about that. If you look back to the language of the Opportunity Zones Transparency, Extension, and Improvement Act, which was initially introduced into the House a couple sessions of Congress ago. The most recent version was introduced in the last session of Congress in, I think it was September of 2023, so about a year and a half ago. I think that Opportunity Zones Transparency, Extension, and Improvement Act will form the basis of tax legislation or of the Opportunity Zones provision of any new tax legislation, but I don't know if they're going to stick with the exact language. So I don't know if the 6-year hold is going to come into play, but there was a period of time, 2 sessions of Congress ago and during the last session of Congress, where they were talking about opening up a basis step up of 15% if you just achieved a 6-year hold. and then, pushing that deferral date back could open up those windows. I'll just show you on the screen here. You can see, remember I was pointing to 2019 and 2021 as being the last dates to achieve. This was a 10%, this was a 15% basis step up, and this was a 10% basis step up if you got invested in a QOF prior to the last dates of these years here. But there was some thought to, what if we push those years out a little bit? If this gets pushed out, this gets pushed back to 23, and then they were talking about possibly making it 6 years instead of 7, which would push it out to 24. Anyways, I think I've got that math right. Suffice it to say, all of this is kind of in flux. Certainly, if you got in before 19, you're looking at a 15% basis step up. And if you got in before 21, end of 21, you're looking at a 10% basis step up. These basis step ups could maybe be available for people who come in afterwards, but it's unclear. And a lot of what I'm talking about right now is just speculation based on prior drafts of legislation that are probably going to get tweaked when they bring it back in this session of Congress. But hopefully we'll have a lot more clarity on that. Maybe not by the April edition of Opportunity Zones office hours, but maybe by the May edition, we'll actually know what's in this best case scenario. Okay, let's see. Let me read some of these here. Okay, yeah. So I got a good question from Christopher Matisek here. Chris, thanks for being here. He wants to know, is there any indication of the change that a qualified opportunity fund can invest into another qualified opportunity fund? So Chris, yes, I think that's most likely going to be included in any legislation to improve opportunity zones in this big tax bill I'm talking about. Again, the draft legislation isn't available yet, but that is one of the biggest pieces of low-hanging fruit to improve opportunity zones that pretty much everybody is on board with on both sides of the aisle. And it's something that the OZ industry has been advocating for many years. So I think absolutely yes. If any tax legislation goes through and includes opportunity zone language, I think this will almost certainly be a part of the opportunity zones part of the tax legislation, will be to allow for a fund of funds, as I call it, because currently a qualified opportunity fund is not allowed to invest in another qualified opportunity fund, but this legislation almost certainly will fix that. Question from Indena again here. She asks, will a recording of the pitch day be on YouTube or a podcast? And yes, it will be. So actually, we record all of our OZ pitch day events, and you can find links to all of them dating back to 2020 right here in the FAQ section. I'll pull up the fall edition. This was the last Opportunity Zone pitch day that we did back in November of 2024. We had a showcase of 12 different OZ deals that day, deals and funds, I should say. Urban Catalyst is a multi-asset fund. They have multiple deals in their fund. This Las Vegas self-storage OZ deal by Your Space America is a single deal. Caliber is a multi-asset fund, and so on and so forth. So you can find links to all of our prior OZ pitch day events if you scroll down to the FAQ section here and click, where can I find recordings for previous OZ pitch day events? And then all of these are on our YouTube channel also. So if you follow us on YouTube, our YouTube URL is youtube.com/opportunitydb, their former name. We kept the handle, and you can always just follow along there on YouTube as well. I don't publish them on the podcast per se though. So let's go back to the questions here. I've got time for a few more questions here. I think we're about at 30 minutes right now. Good show, David Silliman. So David, I think you were the one who was clarifying about the step ups a moment ago. I see that's you there, David. Good to see you. Hi, thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Let's see. Audio Skills asks, is there an audio version of this YouTube show, Jimmy? Yes, there is. Thanks We do have an audio version. It's available on on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other major podcast listening apps. Just open up your podcast app and search for Opportunity Zones podcast, and you can't miss us. We're also available if you just go to opportunityzones.com/podcast. You can find us there as well. Let's see. Chris weighs in again. He says, "Thanks, Jimmy. Great idea about this podcast. Thank you for keeping up with these changes and sharing with us the development." Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks for keeping following the show. And I'm trying to keep everybody up to date here, so appreciate it. A little comment here from Andrew. "Jimmy, you're the best. Thanks for keeping us up to date." Thank you, Andrew. Let's see. We got another question here. This one comes from David. Also, David is asking now, what are your thoughts about non-capital gains being able to be invested into QFs? David, great question. This is a ask by the OZ industry. Namely, I'll name the Novogradac Opportunity Zones Working Group has written a letter to President Trump's administration about a month or so ago, I think. And this was one of the big ideas for the modernization of the Opportunity Zone tax policy was, hey, let's allow for after-tax dollars to be invested. And it won't get the step up and it won't get the deferral period, but it should at least be able to capitalize on that 10-year benefit of eliminating capital gains tax on all OZ investments so long as you hold for at least 10 years. It's pretty much everybody wants this, right? I think it's a no-brainer for most people. Like, why not? Let's grow the program as big as possible. Let's open this up to a new class of investors, also people who may not have capital gains. Let's allow them to invest ordinary income. Let's allow them to invest savings, after-tax dollars, non-gains dollars, whatever you want to call it. The one sticking point might be that it might make the program just cost too much or score too high, according to the Congressional Budget Office. So I'm not so sure. By the way, it's a great idea, and I wish it could happen because it would make the Opportunity Zones program huge, and it would make it a lot easier for investors to get in. You wouldn't have to worry about triggering a capital gain. But unfortunately, I don't know. If I'm making a prediction right now, I'm going to guess that this probably won't be part of the legislation to improve and extend and renew Opportunity Zones. There's a chance, and the industry would love to have it, but I just think at the end of the day, it's probably a bridge too far, and I think it's going to be one of the big pushbacks from more cost-conscious members of Congress. They don't want this to score that high. That said, overall, by the way, when we're looking at this huge tax or budget reconciliation bill that's coming down the pike here from the Republican Party, it's going to be passed along party lines. Opportunity Zones is kind of a drop in the bucket compared to all of the other programs and all of the other spending and tax cuts that are going to go into it. There's $4.5 trillion of tax cuts, at least according to this version 1 of this Republican Party budget blueprint that just passed last Tuesday night. Opportunity Zones are a minuscule part of that. It's not a huge priority. So I don't know. Maybe they can slip it in. But I'm not too optimistic about that. I wanted to go to a couple of questions that I got via email. We got a few more minutes here. By the way, if you do have any questions, if you're joining us late, this is Opportunity Zones Office Hours. I'm Jimmy Atkins, and I take your questions live for about 30 to 45 minutes here. So if you have any questions for me, please submit them using the YouTube live chat, and I'll get to as many questions as I can. I got a question here from Steve via email last week. Big email, but the gist of it boiled down to, if I'm an existing property owner in an Opportunity Zone, how can I benefit if I develop it myself? And unfortunately for Steve, you can't. Or you can, but you got to jump through some hoops. There's a few different ways to do this, by the way. And you can get a little bit creative with this. There's some accountants and some attorneys who know more about this than I do. I'm just going to explain to you, first of all, at a high level, you can't, with an asterisk. The Opportunity Zone statute really wants new investment from new owners into opportunity zones. So the statute itself says that the property or the asset in the opportunity zone has to be sold to an unrelated party. The transaction has to occur after December of 2017. Now, one option is hone in on what I just said about unrelated party, right? So what is an unrelated party? That's the key question. So can you sell it to yourself in an LLC or your wife in an LLC? Well, no, not really. But unrelated party really means that here's you right here, right? Okay. And you've got this OZ, I guess it would actually be OZ land or OZ property. Okay. I'll just call it OZP or land. Okay. Opportunity zone property or land. So you own this. How do you capitalize on this? You have to sell it. Okay. So you sell it to, and you have to sell it to a QOF ideally. Okay. You sell it to a QOF. But now who owns this QOF? Well, according to the IRS, you can actually own a part of that QOF, but your sharing ratio, your profits interests, and your capital accounts interests in that QOF cannot exceed 20%. So it has to be less than or equal to 20%. But as long as you're at this lower level of ownership, then you're good to go. So that's one way of getting around this. Now, you're leaving a lot on the table there, unfortunately, but that's really just the way that the statute lays out that you have to sell it to an unrelated third party. Am I missing anything there, by the way? Is there another way to do this? I haven't found another way to do this, but if you have experience doing this, or maybe you're an accountant or an attorney and you've structured something like this, feel free to chime in the chat, and I'll be sure to read what you have to say on the air here. One other question I got. Let me go back to my main screen here. Got just a few more minutes before I wrap up. If you do have any questions or comments, please do feel free to chime in the chat. And we do this the first Monday of every month. So if you're joining us late and then you missed out on this one, make sure you join us first Monday of every month at 3 p.m. Eastern time right here on the OpportunityZones.com YouTube channel. We'll get to one more question here. It's kind of related. From what I understand, this is from Bill. From what I understand, there is no advantage that can be derived from an OZ investment on personally owned land. So kind of a similar question. I'm going to answer it in a similar fashion. Yeah, pretty much no. So I'm not sure exactly what he means by personally owned land. First of all, for your primary residence, you can't really do anything with a primary residence. That doesn't count. But even if it's a commercial property you own or land, undeveloped land that you own, the best way you can do anything with it is sell it and take the money and run. Now, you can hold on to at least 20% of the QOF that you sell it to. But also just know, personally owned land, that makes me want to say that you can't just buy and hold some land and own it personally. It has to be controlled. It has to be transacted into a qualified opportunity fund, first of all, after December of 2017. And then it has to be developed into a real active trade or business. So you actually have to put a building there, put a business in the building, or lease up the building. You can't just use it to speculate. You can't have raw land and hold it for 10 years and then sell it at a profit if you don't actually develop it. Because the entire congressional intent behind the policy is to spur economic activity in these areas that have traditionally not received private investment. So if you're just buying and holding and speculating, it doesn't really count. All right, that's really all I wanted to say. We do have one more comment here, I think. Another chime in here from Audio Skills. Thanks, Jim. I love opportunity, and I think the program holds great promise. And you cover it like a boss. Thank you, Audio Skills. We are out of time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed today's episode, give us a like, hit that thumbs up button. Helps us out a lot. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as mentioned, we also are now on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so you can join us there as well. I'll be back with another episode soon. Join us Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the OpportunityZones.com YouTube channel. Thanks, everybody.